The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Mid-Carolina Service Company.
Mid-Carolina Service Company is the first name to search for your residential or commercial HVAC needs in Lexington and surrounding areas.
Just go holler at Jason and Clint. They'll hook you up on the air conditioners, on the restaurant equipment, refrigerators, refrigeration, ice machine repair. They've been doing this for years. I know them cats forever.
Family owned and operated since 2006, they pride themselves in their quality work and customer relationships. Call 803-356-4153 or visit midcarolinaserviceco.com for a no obligation quote for service today.
The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by True Brilliance Entertainment.
True Brilliance is a production, promotions, and management company dedicated to connecting artists and producers across the Carolinas to music industry professionals.
Several of their clients have placements both domestic and internationally as a result of their services.
Are you an artist or producer looking to build meaningful relationships within the music industry? Then True Brilliance is for you. Check them out at paramilitary.com. That's spelled P-A-I-R-A military.com.
This episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Bob's. Bob's is a Columbia-based retailer of over 100 Black-owned products from 20 Black-owned businesses. Bob's offers a wide range of items from household cleaning, cosmetics, and everything in between. With every visit to Bob's, you support Black-owned businesses, giving them the opportunity to grow and establish connections with our community. Bob's is located inside the Noma warehouse at 2222 Sumter Street in Columbia, South Carolina. Visit their website, weshopbobs.com, for in-store pickup or to find out more. Bob's can also be found via social media on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at weshopbobs. When you stop by, tell them the Hilltop Glove sent you. Bob's brings quality Black brands to the Columbia community. The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Red Rooster Sports Bar and Grill. Red Rooster is your neighborhood bar and grill serving the best wings, burgers, and baskets in the Met.
Like the amazing food, the bar is always on tap, and there's plenty of screens to watch the big game. Red Rooster is the Midland's premier meetup spot for local car and bike clubs, fraternities, and sororities.
Staff is dedicated to accommodating all kinds of parties and events. If you're looking to catch a game, have a bite, and a drink, look no further than the Red Rooster.
Red Rooster is located at 7500 Wilson Boulevard, Columbia, South Carolina. For more information, visit redroostersportsbar.com or visit them on Facebook and Instagram at Red Rooster Sports Bar. Go where the winners go.
Welcome to the Hilltop Glove Podcast.
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 Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Napoleon Wells, the best and most electrifying psychologist in the world.
Big facts.
Napoleon is originally from the Bronx, New York, and has lived in Columbia since late 2011. Napoleon is a practicing clinical psychologist and former Claflin professor specializing in the treatment of trauma and anxiety disorders. He has used his background and expertise to deconstruct the psychology of racism and supremacy, including the performance of his TEDx talk entitled The Cure for Racism. Napoleon is also a medium, social justice columnist, and published author of Black speculative fictions works entitled The Siege at Illinmorrow. Wow. I had to make sure I wasn't messing up.
No, you're okay. I had your back.
Perfect. A bullet from God's gun and a blade in God's hand. How are you doing today?
Listen, I'm doing well, man. Thank you for bringing me in so. It sounds like somebody else's life when you read it like that. It truly does. Yeah. But it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I hope you're all doing well.
Yes, thank you for being here.
So, of course, I have myself, DJ Aaron Watt, have Tamaya. And we also have Mike over here. I'm Mike today. So we're going to have a great conversation today, just asking a couple of questions and just trying to see what you think about certain things that we have to deal with in this day and age. I know our podcast is an interesting one. It is for millennials learning how to adult properly.
Sure.
So there are some times in which we feel ongoing process, and we need to learn. And we don't always get the information that we need from our elders to help us grow properly. So having somebody come over and being able to
bridge the gap.
Say it again, Lord Jesus. We need those lessons.
I think, you know, I mean, even before we dive into, you know, any questions, if there are, and I want to, if we can set the table some. I don't know that there's a proper way to adult, not giving humanity.
Thank you.
Listen, there's, I mean, if the history of humanity has taught us anything, I think it's that you have to develop a means of functioning best in the moment where you are. True. And a significant part of that process, I think, even is goal setting, right? You know, what kind of human am I trying to be? And that sometimes requires that we assess what were the strengths and the weaknesses of the plan that was placed before us by our parents and our ancestors. What are our core values and how do we inform those? How do we feed ourselves? What kind of psychological food are we getting every day and what was given to us? And how do we challenge that, better develop that? What kind of influences do we surround ourselves with? And then how do we get energy and gain energy from our environment? How do we get our needs met? You know, what is our motivation?
Ooh, this is gonna be a good episode.
Right. I think a lot of that moves us in a direction where we, if we can call it adult better, I think it's just develop better. You know, we're always ongoing and growing. Good point. Until they put us in the ground at some point, and then we become just another part of that cycle. And whatever way happens,
Excellent. Yeah. Well, we always start off the same way.
Okay.
And it's always necessary.
Okay.
We got to ask you about your early beginnings and influences.
So I'm from the Bronx, New York, right? Big Bronx energy, always. You know,
boogie down.
Big Bronx. And I was raised in the Bronx in the 80s. So the crack cocaine. A lot of burned out buildings. But my parents, what I would say is that they did a lot to try to make certain that we lived as sound a life with regard to our conduct as possible. And so they were, I'm going to say, products of their generation. You whooped kids' asses to get them to act right.
True.
You know, you yelled them into shape. You pushed them and coerced them into shape as much as you could. So the support looked a certain way.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of folks in our generation now have moved into the spaces where they call it reparenting. Right. I'm trying to raise myself to in the way that I would have loved for my parents to do so. My parents were Black parents in the Bronx in the 80s. So there was, you know, poor Black and brown people in our community, even still on the block where I was raised right now, 196 in Morris. You know my block because you hit the corner and there's a Puerto Rican flag hanging between two buildings. That's how you know you hit Morris Ave. My mom still lives there, you know, heavy New Yorker, doesn't drive, doesn't have a license, doesn't want one. You know, is absolutely not in that space. So New York, for me at that point, early beginnings, was trying to figure out why people were so self-destructive. And myself being a bit of a strange child in that I think my parents allowed us a lot of room to pursue our interests. And mine tended to be comic books, skateboarding, but also hip hop, a lot of sports, basically anything that I wanted to be in. You know, so my father was like, if you want to get good at expressing yourself in competition with others, you need to learn how to play chess.
Smart.
And he didn't have a kind approach to it.
Oh, wow.
You know, when he set the board up, this is war from go. And so move up, right? Yeah. And so I developed an understanding like, okay, man, you know, there are small pieces of meat in the world because of all the poverty we experience. You have to competitively go get it.
Yeah.
And hip hop moved into that space for all of us in the same way, right? We can only listen to so many voices and they have to be the very best one. Anything you were doing in New York at the time, be good at it or shut up about it, right? You can't do it. And I think that has even influenced a lot of our development later in that we, New Yorkers of my era, struggle with what hip hop is. And that almost anybody can do it. And we look at it like, yo, these niggas is not nice, man. Like, how are you rapping? You can't touch the mic and feel it. It's terrible. But
true.
In many ways, it's why hip hop is so powerful is that it does allow for access for everyone. And that was a powerful voice at that time is like, do whatever you're interested in. right? There was so much art that was around at that time. Rammellzee was huge. You know, he was bigger than Basquiat was.
Yeah.
I can recall at that point. And, you know, rest in peace to both. But there was this sense of do whatever you feel you should be doing, but be prepared to fight for it.
Gotcha.
Because if you were a skateboarder at that point, cats on the block was not hearing that. You're going to have to throw some hands.
Like somebody coming for you.
They're going to give you blues, man. Like folks always valued intelligence.
Yeah.
You know, they valued cunning in many ways. They valued understanding and being able to engage with your environment, but difference was treated as difference is treated everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
So there was a lot of art that was around. There was incredible crushing poverty that was around. There was crack cocaine in the background, but there were my parents who were always solid, right? And I don't mean that they were perfect. My father was a pretty violent alcoholic. But when he sobered up, he was making breakfast, making sure we got to school, you know, therefore discipline. So it was a very odd space for me to be in, right? I'm trying to understand people. And I think even then, being very young, you know, having a couple of siblings, older brother, younger sister, and seeing how just destroyed our communities were by epidemic that was raging around us. I'm trying to get a sense of why people are striving and why they were doing what they were doing. And I imagine that that's where my fascination with psychology probably started. Didn't have a sense as a kid I wanted to be a psychologist. I just wanted to make sense of why people were doing what they were doing.
Figure them out. Yeah.
Yeah, like what was it that was making people tick? Why was my father so disturbed? Why did he shout and scream so very much? And why did he decide alcohol was something that he would move toward? And in a lot of instances, how was it he was popping up when he was sober and being so loving? Like it was just over my head.
Weird, yeah.
Right.
It was over my head, right? You know, and my parents seeing how other children behave, why were they pushing us so hard? I think all of the questions coalesced when I got older, and then I kind of stumbled into a profession that allowed me to explore those scientifically in a way. So, you know, it was New York. It was all of the very best and worst of humanity, you know, up and down every street, as you can imagine, and just tons and tons of people and a lot of noise.
Right.
You know, just one of the most amazing places on earth, but a hothouse for development. You know, New York is always going to apply a lot of pressure.
Oh, my Lord.
And it still does. I think one of the worst things that happened to the city, and I know a lot of New Yorkers may hear this and they'll either completely agree or vehemently disagree, is the super gangs moving their way into the city. Because you, in New York City, always had crews.
Yeah.
You know, so my block might be good with the next two blocks, and we got beef with, you know, the Dominicans across the concourse. You know, and love to my Dominican people, but y'all know we was fighting back in the day. but that was kind of what the understanding was, right?
It's all local.
Correct.
Until Reagan's pipeline.
Correct. So now you have this federal pipeline, which happens, and then so folks were moving drugs cross country, getting arrested, and moved into different federal systems. So you now had, in the pretty early 90s, in the federal system in the Northeast and in the Midwest, moving into Northeastern prisons, brothers from the West Coast.
Yeah.
And so the Latin Kings ran the prison system at that time, but you now have brothers who are Bloods moving to the system, and they're introducing all of the Black population in the prisons who were just the Black Americans, small African inmate population, the very large Jamaican and island population. You had some of the renegades who were in their spaces, and now everybody had a banner fly under who was Black.
Wow.
So the blood just exploded. And of course, that moved down to the streets. So these very crowded streets in New York where everybody is on top of each other. Now you have 500 young men all flying one flag. That kind of pressure moving around the city right now. Like, it was a problem in the 80s, but it's
even worse.
You know, it's brutal in many ways now. But I think that kind of pressure, if you not survive it, but learn how to thrive in it. And it's unfortunate because that kind of reality is true everywhere. It just happens to be more crowded there. It's true everywhere, wherever you are.
That population density.
Correct. That kind of pressure does create a certain kind of personality. So, you know, much of that personality has come with me, you know, to Columbia. And I've discovered a lot of like minds here. A lot of like minds here, and a lot of like drivers here as well.
Oh, wow. That's a good point. Yeah. Very good point. Now, would you consider the the current career that you're in, your dream job, was it your dream?
No, it wasn't my dream. If I'm being honest, I would say my dream was probably at some point to write comic books.
Oh, really?
Then to
Stop
be
it,
a
for
poet. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
True creative.
listen, I write shit now. You know what I'm saying? That's
In a
how it
different
is.
context.
Yeah, different content.
Yeah. So I would say I was thinking poetry. I was thinking comics, just, something related to connecting to people,
Gotcha.
and communicating with them. But in many ways, I find psychology to be more in art than science because I'm a practicing psychologist. Right.
Break that down.
Yeah.
Break that
So
down.
there's the matter of moving into a space with a human being who very often doesn't understand even their own motivation or why they do what they do. And then helping them to make sense of it and not blame themselves, which we very often do, and not blame others. Right. So one of the benefits of our society now is that we've moved into a space where we engage mental health more and we want to, in fact, see more people in. But if there is a downside, it's almost like having chimps with automatic weapons, though, because our society is very carelessly using terms they don't fully understand to
we
attack
throwing
other beings.
diagnoses all over the place.
Yeah.
So very often you will have someone simply say, I think everyone around me is narcissist. Well, no, let's try and visit
Just selfish
why
assholes.
that is. Yeah.
It's not quite the same.
In many instances.
But it's a spectrum.
And correct. And sometimes I don't think we do enough with the broad concepts, right? There was this point in the middle of my career, I was doing a lot of lecturing and I still do. And so people were tossing out the notion of being woke at almost everyone. If you had an idea and then a second idea and it was advocacy for other people, in some ways, and it was collective, then you were woke. And what I had to very actively tell people is psychologically, I don't identify as an ally. And most people don't. They don't do the homework necessary.
Yeah.
They don't really, they want the social currency and points that come with being woke or being an ally or being an advocate, but they aren't doing the necessary work, right?
Actions.
If a member of my white community and neighbors comes to me and tells me that they are an ally, they have to provide for me the documentation that they had a seat at the table for us to develop what their work and relationship with me on my behalf is going to be.
Touché.
If you simply step forward and said, well, I'm an ally, listen, where are your bona fides?
Right.
Hey.
Right. Who, in fact, said that you're good to go and that you can represent in the same way?
But that's good that you question
Who signed
it.
your card?
You have
who signed it?
right. And the same thing with advocacy. If I'm saying I'm advocating for someone, well, I mean, who is it gave me my marching orders?
Yeah.
And so I think there was a complete lack of cultural humility that is in that space, and as far as I should probably steer clear of wokeness, man.
I was about to ask you.
No.
We can steer right into it. We can crash back to I was about to ask you about.
You know me.
No,
I'm
I
trying
think-
to. You gotta dig.
There's effective space for us to speak with people and meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And then build forward. I think as our various communities, right, we want to be seen saying the right, even if we don't always believe it. And then when people have often spoken with me privately, right, they will pull me aside and they're like, man, I don't know, but I don't want to say anything because I kind of feel this way. So we've started to talk at people, even in social spaces, and score a lot of points on people. You didn't know that. You didn't know all of those terms, right? Can recall this conversation I was having, and this brother kept stumbling over LGBT. And then I was like, bro, just say what you're comfortable with, because you were taking a lot of time to get that right. And he was just like, all right, man, well, I mean, if I'm saying them LGB niggas, are you comfortable with that? If it's going to allow us to have the conversation, I understand where your heart is.
Right.
Now, don't say it to people
Yes.
outside of our
Don't do it in the
conversation.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying? But I think we had to, and we don't have any problem with our language on this, do we?
No.
I looked at a couple. I just wanted to make sure.
You will not tell me that my culture is profane.
Right.
Yes.
Precisely. I think a part of what we have done with regard to psychology and mental health is we've made it so that people feel free to make room for themselves and to attempt to heal, but people are not setting goals and understanding the work that they have to do before they venture into that space. And
Like being realistic.
Yeah, their goals when they're going in, I want to be able to learn how to better deal with other people. And what they're really meaning is I want to know why they do the things that make me feel the way I feel.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
It's like setting your attention.
Absolutely. And living intentionally is important, even when coming into a therapeutic space. A lot of what I work with my patients on, I tell them very early, you're not supposed to feel good all the time. That's not how life is meant to be.
It just means you high.
Correct. And even in those instances, when you come down, your body is still experiencing the pain. Emotionally, you're still experiencing the pain. Yeah. And sometimes you've numbed it, so it's worse when you come out on that other end.
Yeah, that happens too.
Yeah. So there's there's the necessity, I think, for those of us who are process leaders, not thought leaders, but process leaders, to realistically ground people who are going to engage in that work.
And what's a process leader?
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, so for me, therapy is a process. Okay. So if I'm engaging with someone and they're coming into it and they're new, then what I'm going to do is to give them reasonable expectations about what we'll be doing. Cool. I'm going to question how you think. Yeah. I'm going to question some of what you believe. I'm going to ask you to continually organize goals and then be flexible in those. So we're going to go through and this is what progress, what progress looks like, right? Yeah. Progress very often is going to be painful. Progress with regard to mental health sometimes is going to be personal truth telling. Yeah. So you're going to move into a space where you say, in my own therapeutic process years back, was just like, I am not a nice person, bro. Came to that point in therapy, just like, I am resentful about what I allowed myself to think reality was, because I had this very intense focused goal toward, if you work hard and do things appropriately, others will see it and you'll land where you should. Yeah. Right. And it worked in both ways. I saw myself in some instances being treated differently than others in a positive way. And there were people simply saying, no, I happen to like who he is. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then there were others who were doing better. And I saw, okay, this is really a game of politics in many instances, not necessarily who is best at what they do or who is working hardest. And I think returning to my belief and love of hip hop and the psychology of hip hop and how it's influenced my career, right? Like I look at Southern hip hop, right? And I have a lot of conversations with friends from back home about why it not only has shaped hip hop, but the world of hip hop globally. Why has it come about in this way? And I'm like, well, it's community. It's community. And it's community that has grown it. I think some of that community is missing a little bit in Colombia. And in South Carolina, I'm going to say that.
Can I say this? I'm going to interject. Yeah. We don't even force anybody to say this. It has to be a real issue.
Yeah.
It's a real issue.
So my feeling is as follows, right? So let's take this podcast as an example. The Hilltop Glove works diligently to bring about relationships and conversation and expression and grounding in and around arts in South Carolina. So someone in some space should identify that this is the official podcast of what? University of South Carolina, Charleston Southern, College of Charleston. But there should be pressure from the public to say, in the same way Atlanta gave us this approach to, even if I think this nigga sucks, he's from Atlanta. Right.
Atlanta does that.
I'm going to absolutely support everything he does, not because I necessarily need to say that I was in it. I need to be able to have the room for everyone in my space to grow.
Move, yes.
In some instances, I almost feel like, and I understand I'm an outsider, you know what I'm saying? My roots are in South Carolina, right? So for y'all that don't know, and you wouldn't know because many of you don't know me, right? But I attended the Carolina Baptist Church in the Bronx, New York. It's still on 225th Street, across the street from Marble Hill Projects. My granddad started that church. He's from South Carolina. So I was always going to make my way back here.
Wow. No South Carolina, New York connection is strong.
It's strong. It's powerful, right? Yeah. So I started a family out here in Dalzell, Sumter area. And so a part of what I've seen making my way back home to my roots, to my family here is I think South Carolina is very often waiting for someone to say we are great. And it's waiting for someone outside of our space to give us the approval. We work our asses off. Yeah, no question about it. But we are sometimes waiting on someone to say we're great, where several other places, not all, but several other they kind of pushed their own. You know what I'm saying? The West Coast became great when it simply decided we're going to do it our way with our voice, and you don't have to buy in.
Yeah. You don't have to
We're going to do it our way, but everybody gets on board. And I think South Carolina in that space has to, you know what I'm saying? Like Preach Jacobs is my man. You might say that I'm biased, right? But everybody out here in this state knows that man.
Yeah.
When that man is at an event, each and every one of you should be present, buying up everything that he is doing, because he's the ambassador. He is our diplomat.
Yeah.
Like, he is the mayor. When Fat Rat is performing somewhere, when Dan Johns is performing somewhere, I'm talking about individuals around our state who put on for our state. Hilltop glove include, like, someone in some space needs to very simply say, right, nah, these in fact are our pillars, and so we're going to grow them. I imagine I feel somewhat strongly about it because I had a sister who was a professor at USC some years back at this point, maybe about 3 years, was kind of like, you know, I see you everywhere, right? Like, I see in Virginia, you were at NYU, you've done all these talks all over. I saw you on television, and I was like, yeah, I would love to work more in South Carolina. And I would, but much like this podcast that we're doing, much like our performers, listen, man, I am the most electrifying psychologist. The Hilltop Glove is one of the greatest entities and podcasts in the States. It's on the state.
Man, I appreciate
and
that.
on our representatives in the state. It's on the community in the state to say, no, we're not going to wait on greatness, just like Atlanta did, New York before, LA before, whatever it is. We're going to crown ourselves.
Yes.
And we're going to put that energy behind what it is we do. And that requires the community to do so. They just got to buy in and do it. Now, you're already doing it. We're going to build it, and several someones are going to come behind you and do that. Where did we start? I know we got here, but where did we start?
Man, we're talking about life.
We were talking about dream jobs.
Got it. Dream jobs.
Yeah.
So nah, man. A dream job would have been probably writing comic books. I read a lot of comic books growing up, mostly Marvel, but then a lot of independent.
Okay.
You heard of
After
Mrs.
that.
Sanford Green?
Oh yeah, no, listen, I met Sanford in person just a few weeks back.
Yeah, he's my teacher.
yeah.
Great
Brother,
teacher.
Very, very dope. Everything he does is dope. And Chuck Brown, dope as well. There's some folks in this state who get busy. Psychology happened firmly probably my freshman year of college.
Really?
Yeah,
Freshman year?
Yeah, took an African-American psychology course. I was a poli-sci major, but took the course and really started to explore these notions that I saw affecting my family overall. My older brother was struggling with his mental health. He was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but this is just before he did 2 stints in prison. I was concerned about my own mental health because I was like, bruh, I'm a brilliant dude, man, but there are instances when I find myself feeling very angry. I find myself feeling very irritable, where I find myself feeling very disturbed. And I would literally like try and check and see what these thoughts, right? Let me ask other people. And then started to look into therapy and then started to pursue it. I was kind of like, okay, my understanding from taking that course and then every course after is like our mental health is related to our overall health.
True.
You know, in every way, but there is so much in the spaces that we can't identify and things that become blind spots. Right? We don't understand a lot of the matrices of behaviors and content of our upbringing that were geared towards survival and not thriving.
Yep.
And so in a lot of instances, our parents in their generations and the generation before them, it was like, just survive. And then the
Make it to the next day.
generations since, how old are you folks, if you don't mind me asking?
35.
38.
Yeah, so y'all are just behind me. So I'll say roughly our generation, we were raised by them. And then the generation immediately after us and the one after that one is a generation that I think is all about finding its own way in a very messy way, which can appear to be emotionally unwell. But in many instances, I think is courageous, right? Yeah. They make a mess of it because they're young.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
They can do that.
But the reality is, you know, that they aren't. So tied into hip hop briefly, right? In late 80s, early 90s, the idea was you go and you get a record deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a record deal is what stamps you.
Right.
Yep.
That's how we know we should be listening to you rap
Yes.
and listening to beats
got
that
signed.
you produce. He got signed.
Yeah.
What I think is amazing about these kids is that they're not waiting for anyone
give a
to
shit
tell
about
them
a
their
deal.
voice is worthy.
No.
I'm going to go into my lab and I'm going to produce something I want to produce and I'm going to share it with my community, of friends and family, and let's see what they think of it.
I don't need an album. I don't need an EP. We recorded this. It's going out tomorrow.
This is what's going out tomorrow. And that's that.
Yeah,
and
not
I
much
think
process.
there's tremendous courageousness in simply saying the world is going to hear my voice. It's not going to censor me. It's not going to be a tool of erasure where my experience is concerned. Now, the things that they say may seem absolutely out of bounds to us. And the things that they do may be out of bounds. But I think the willingness to do it, the willingness to engage it, the willingness to challenge a lot of the dynamics that we've given to them emotionally, right? I heard this sister by the name of Lado, right? And she said something that stuck with me. I imagine it was a little profound. She said every time she feels away, instead of going to a therapist, she goes to Twitter because that's her therapy space.
Oh, God.
Right? It's like group therapy.
Yeah.
Now, it's the worst possible place you could go to for it. But our generation would hold it.
Say it again.
Yeah.
Right? And then maybe eventually you go about the business of processing through it. I think a piece of art that demonstrates where we are at our best and at our worst is Atlanta. Donald Glover looking at, look at how absurd we are.
Yeah, it looks
right.
wild.
We know we're not our best.
Yeah.
But we're trying to trudge through life. We're trying to develop an identity still because we're not trying to do it the way our parents did, which was work for somebody for 30 years, then retire.
Yeah, be unhappy.
Yeah, we're trying in that way. Now,
Social Security.
they're more courageous, but they're also more delusional.
Yeah, the delusion, I think, assists them in that fact.
Absolutely. But
I'm not delusional.
We're still delusional at times.
And maybe a part of what is necessary, myself as an Afrofuturist, someone who writes Black speculative fiction, I think delusion may be necessary in our day-to-day experience. We have to believe something other than this being reality.
Coping mechanism?
Yeah. I think maybe even an advocacy mechanism.
Ooh.
Maybe even a change mechanism, or a chaos mechanism.
You got to dream it before you can do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
you just said something that I'm going to see if you can expound upon a little bit.
Sure.
You talk about chaos mechanism.
Sure.
And I had a deal. All right, so I like reading strange books and et cetera.
Okay.
And there's this book I was reading about chaos magic and the importance of using chaos in order to create new things and to have fruitfulness. Can you explain why chaos mechanisms are important?
Yeah, I think in many ways they violate the comfort of the human experience, which is necessary too. So the notion of chaos, especially in like Black speculative fiction, is that it is as it should be. It should always be changing. And chaos is inherent in that change. And so
surf the wave, don't stop it.
Exactly. And in many instances, it's a matter of creating what you don't see if you need it. Which, even though it's moved into Black speculative fiction, is exactly how Black folks have always lived. If I don't see it and I don't have it, but I need it, I'm going to find a way to make it. And that's all over the diaspora.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not a notion that is new, but chaos being necessary to upset what become these hard systems that we live over.
Okay,
and
that
under.
makes more sense.
And with, so supremacy in many instances gives us this sense of security. Right. Here's what you do for a living. Here are the laws that you follow. And here are the things that are outside of the bounds of your control.
Gotcha.
So what the chaos and the notion of chaos in that space allows for, and even some nihilism, is like, I don't have to give my full self over to this. Instead, can I create systems that fight this, that go against this, and create a new kind of reality, new vocabularies, new ways of being, and new systems that we can find ourselves in, right? So even this notion of, what's here on my sweatshirt is more one that several of us who are in the futurist space have talked about. It's like, nah, man, we don't have a great Black woman villain and a great Black woman hero in fiction spaces that we can build on and project onto.
Yeah.
And maybe we need that.
For y'all listening, the T-shirt says, "A Black girl will save the world."
Yeah.
Yes.
So some of what we have to essentially do is then create that. And that's chaos that disrupts the system. And when you do it, when you push those ideas forward, you understand how chaotic it is based on who's opposed to it. And if it's those who are firmly entrenched in the power space in the system, there are those of us who build Black women or Black queer heroes, and then you will immediately see, here comes the resistance in place. And it usually looks one way. It's usually white and male and young. But sometimes
the
older.
Little Mermaid.
The Little Mermaid.
Oh, my Lord.
And
I Am Woman King with Viola.
Oh, my
all that stuff
Lord.
coming out this week.
And I wish in many instances that even those were more chaotic.
Say they aren't chaotic enough.
It's
a nice approach.
They're more than enough for where we are. I think they're they're necessary. And then the idea of chaos is, how do we disrupt that completely? So how do we create an entire fiction or an entire world that focuses on Black lives and is exclusively that, not how white people are influencing them, not how the world outside is battering those, but the power is there, the influence is there, and fully realized with these people, their lives are fully realized without that other influence. I think in many instances, the idea of spell casting and magic.
That's what,
that spell casting
like
is a big one. Yeah,
as a comic book enthusiast.
It's huge. It's huge. And we're in a moment where comic books are everywhere. Right. And so you have a lot of people who consider themselves comic book fans. And I'm going to try not to be one of those snobs.
Be mean. I know you got to be. You from the original. Come on.
Well, there are a lot of people that I think are MCU fans.
Yes.
That aren't necessarily fans of comics overall. Because if you get into the world of comics, there are people that are already in that spell casting space and in that chaos space and creating these new kind of realities. You have to seek them out, right? You have comics like Godhood Comics, which gave us the antagonists.
Yeah.
And the antagonists are very simply a family of Black villains. That's it. That's what they do.
Simple.
Right? And the heroes are there, and they're there, and they don't consider themselves villains. They're just like, we're going to do what really needs to be done.
Right.
The heroes work within these bounds, but we work within the bounds of what we have. And if it puts us at odds with them, that's fine.
Right.
Like, so be it.
Yeah.
Correct. Which it's we're having the kind of conversations and experiences now that I think are so affirming to young and older Black minds and bodies, right? The world is so open to us right now.
Yeah.
And in many ways, what happens is you have the reality, that supremacist kind of work that comes pushing back, even the spaces that you're operating in. I am encouraged by what I'm seeing of podcasts. You think of podcasts a decade and a decade and a half ago.
Man, I thought they were going to die. I was like, no, we got to
you have a strict sports podcast. You have a strict news podcast. I came across this podcast, these sisters in Atlanta, just a couple of weeks ago. One of them heard one of my talks and introduced herself. They are the book reading hoes. Right. And they're launching in just a couple of weeks. But they were literally like, no, listen, man, we're all mothers. We're Black women. We do a ton of reading, and as they're describing it for me, I'm in my head like, this podcast could not have been thought of, dreamed of, or introduced when we initially were pushing into this space.
Right. Because we were trying to replicate what we saw on network television.
Yeah.
Correct.
And now it's like, well, no, if there's 100 people that want to listen to this, then done. Here you go.
Right. And you take a podcast like your own that has as, in my view, in my mind, and looking at your podcast, one of the pillars, and it sounds like there's several, but one of them is, the Carolinas have something to say. And so putting those who are in space in the Carolinas who are creating, and not creating just one type of art. All art is beautiful. Art. Let's give everyone an opportunity.
Everybody is valuable.
And what I think is rich there is then creating the conversation, because it then creates, as we were speaking about somewhat earlier, that kind of connected and festival environment. Now that I know that you were in touch with these folks, if I take something that I've written and I want to talk to the SC Arts Commission about producing a short film, who out here is doing the work around film creation and television creation?
We know a few
I need
people.
to touch base with them, we know. But we can start those conversations here as you've done. So that's pillar work, right? That's necessary work. That's community building work. And not just the Carolinas, but everywhere needs to hear that.
Very, very good point.
Absolutely.
Very good point. And this is just, I guess, pushing along into some of our questions that we have for you. Psychology is the scientific study of the human mind and its functions, especially those affecting behavior in a given context. As we all know, the mind is very complex. What are some interesting facts that you have discovered about the mind based on people's perspectives?
Okay. I think one thing that I've discovered in doing the work is that the mind really isn't very complex.
Ooh.
Nah.
I like this.
The mind functions, it has a very specific function. Bring in information, process that information, and then allow the machine that I'm a part of to function based on that information. It's almost everything outside of the mind that's complex and dirty and messy, and then it's fed into the mind. So the mind is having to make sense of this very sloppy, dirty, very inefficient information. It's trying to filter in what it needs, but it's taking in all of the information that is around it and trying to make sense of it. The mind wants to do a very simple job. So if you take a child, be kind to the child, make sure the child's needs are met, 9 out of 10 times you're going to raise a relatively healthy human. Then there's a matter of what the needs become. What do we feed into that child around what needs are? And then how you get those needs met. Because then the mind still has the notion of how you get needs met in some way. So we have needs for intimacy and connectedness. We have needs for purpose and usefulness, right? How do we gain that? If you don't feel that you do a thing well, who started telling you that you don't do these things well? How do you find what it is that's where the information becomes
like
messy.
the programming?
The concept is very simple. It's a computer. It's a huge supercomputer, right?
Yeah.
So if you take your smartphone and you have 5 Google search items up and you minimize one, it's still running. You know, and that's in fact how our mind is working. It's operating on all of these things. Well, I want to try a new thing, but one thing that's operating in the background is, my grandparents telling me you'll never be able to do that, or feeling as if I've failed. So what then becomes the work that we have to do is how do we define failure, right? Because failing is not only necessary, but it's good. It can be healthy for us if we process through it. What did I learn? Right. You have someone like Conor McGregor. For those of you who don't know, he's an MMA fighter, right? But he was asked maybe about 4 years ago why he is such a confident individual. And he said, well, it's my approach to failure, right? And it's I win or I learn. That's it. I win or I learn.
It's that simple.
So in a space where I didn't perform as well as you thought I should have, or I thought I should, what did I learn in that space? And then in winning, what did I learn about myself in winning? And maybe I didn't learn enough, and that's why I lost there. So even though I consider him a relatively underdeveloped human overall, he had this brilliant idea that I think all humans can absorb. How do we define what happens to us? If something traumatic happens to us, do I blame myself for it happening, such as abuse? So I was helpless. How do I change forever feeling helpless? And will I always feel this way? The mind is processing that. Right, in a very simple way. How do I change my sense of what it means to be helpless or to be helpful or to be useful or to be resourceful? Whatever way that is fed. And then even to feel connected or disconnected, right? What are my expectations of others? What we've done, I think, is kind of freeze-dried our approach to mental health and understanding and cognition. So we want for people to feel healthy and well, but folks, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to self-care your way to happiness. Let me just be the 100 to tell you that. Self-care is necessary, but it isn't going to be enough. And what you're telling yourself might be a part of your self-care is really you settling as opposed to doing the work to determine what's going to be necessary for your care.
Wow.
Right? If you're shopping, right, you have that retail therapy that is really more of a salve for a period of time. It's not going to effectively.
You're just trying to, it's another drug.
Right. If you are distracting yourself, it's not going to be fully effective. What you have to do is to explore why I feel unwell so often. Is it that I don't have a job that feeds me and relationships that feed me? And am I expecting too much of others based on what they can do? And I see a lot of couples, and very often I try to reframe what their expectations are. I myself have been married for, I believe my wife won't hear this, 16 years.
You got to do math. That's fine. That's normal.
We're 16 years in, right?
Blessings.
Congratulations.
So thank you. So if me understanding my wife and looking at her as a human, there's the difference between the person she is and the role that she is in. So she's my spouse, but she is Deidre. She's a human. Right. And I understand the person she's in. She does not like to cook. She has never liked to cook. It is not something she feels she's good at, and she doesn't get very much affirmation from it. So if I think of my spouse in that role, my spouse, whoever they are, as being someone who has to cook for me every day, I'm going to be unhappy and disappointed. And it would be my fault for having that sense of obligation for that person. I've set goals which were unreasonable based on the person. And sometimes we do that to others and are thus unhappy in relationships, so we do it to ourselves. And some of the way in which we think is influenced by how much access we have to other people. Right? I can recall some time back seeing that meme, and it was like, if you can't accept me at my worst, then you don't deserve me at my best, which is just some of the dumbest shit ever. Just absolutely some of the most irresponsible and childish thinking. But there are so many people who like these things because they're easy access. And in reality, you should not be terrorizing people. And that's a form of terrorism.
Thank
to think in
you.
this way.
I mean, I know what my rock bottom looks like, and I don't want nobody else seeing that shit.
Right. Well, but there's a way you can approach it, right? You should be willing to then stratify that, right? If you are willing to make room for me when I'm not at my best, and you're...
This portion of the podcast is brought to you by Lynx Recording Studio. Lynx is a premier audio and video recording studio in the greater Charleston area. With 4 completely different booths, multiple peripherals, and 4 producers, they have the ability to service all facets of audio and video creativity. If you need to record a song, a podcast, create a demo, or even take headshots and complete drops for a Hollywood film, we've done it. Call us at 843-879-9386 or search us online at lynxrecordingstudios.com. That's LYNX recordingstudios.com.
Reasonable expectation should be that I won't always be at my best. And that should be your expectation of myself.
Okay.
When I am better than my worst, how am I going to make that up to you? How am I going to feed back into our relationship? How am I going to let you know that the work that you put into a room that you held for me was worth my time? And then how are we going to reciprocate?
Because there's an energy budget with these things.
Absolutely.
I mean, that sounds all new age and shit.
Absolutely.
But it is. I mean, if you want to quantify, like you got build up and you got pull down and you got to balance it out.
Right.
So it's almost like it's almost economical, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. We don't want to think of ourselves in that way, but energy, wellness, they're not inexhaustible resources.
Gotcha.
We have a limited amount of those things and we can recharge. And there is work required in recharging, but some of the work can be done on the front end if we're very honest with ourselves about how we function. Right? What type of person am I? When I mention in therapy learning that I'm not very nice as a person, it doesn't mean that I became aware that I'm a bad person. It's just like, no, I'm very driven.
Yeah.
Right. And if you come into my space, I have expectations and I need to be better about saying what those expectations are and then making room for people who in many ways aren't aware of what that means or don't know how to function in that space. And even going so far as to learn people's language and vocabulary emotionally. Right. If you say to someone, I want for this person to love me, how did they learn how to give and receive love in their own home?
Oh, that's important.
And in their own life. And how then, because they may be in their head saying, well, I showed you a lot of love.
Right.
There are people always, I do workshops, I did this workshop in Sumter. I won't call any names, but there was a gentleman that was like, well, man, my wife keeps telling me she's a good woman and I don't know. Well, how does she identify? How does she define? How does she create meaning around the space of being a good woman? Because in her head, she might be a very hardworking woman and saying that is good.
Right.
But you are saying to yourself, well, nah, man, I want for her to show me attention every day and she doesn't. But your dishes are done. Your clothes are washed. You
Just
in
different
fact
level of
have
understanding, right?
and different means of defining it, and in some instances, there's some people who are so completely self-obsessed, not even quite narcissists. I want to make sure that we separate those two, that they can't fully understand how other people define their reality. And so a part of it is defining reality with others, but also defining it for yourself.
Gotcha.
So can you break down consciousness and subconscious?
Yeah, so consciousness is what you are fully mindful and aware of. If it's a thought that you have that you are aware of, that is within your conscious space. It's something that you can identify as an experience. Subconscious, these are things that are operating, but we are not aware of. Right. So the idea is you have that iceberg, and you have the smaller tip of the iceberg, which is our consciousness. And Freud in particular, and Freud was wrong about a lot of shit, but the subconscious is an area where we look at and we say, no, that's absolutely the case, because most of us are simply older versions of ourselves as children. We haven't really moved past it.
Thank you.
Yeah, the things that happened to you while you were a child, you may cope with them somewhat better, but the things that occurred in that space are still very much with you.
Yeah.
Right. And they impact your culture with regard to the community you were raised in, what that community looks like, the values that it gave to you. Even the kind of ideas and notions and reality you created in your head to cope with what may have, in many instances, have been negative experiences. All of that shapes who we are. And then we bring that into the spaces where relationships occur. And we tell ourselves consciously Now, I'm going to try to do the right thing. I'm going to try to be good. I'm going to try to, very often those experiences are going to come back, right? I think about, for myself, graduate school, right? Walking into a PhD program, full clinical psych, which are very white programs, naturally, very staid programs, typically somewhat quiet. My feeling about psychology even then was that it's supposed to be as messy as humans are. And we can't reach as many people with mental health and wellness unless we make it messier.
That's
right.
Amazing. If you're trying to treat it like chemistry, people don't fit.
It won't work.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that I do very openly with my patients, especially if they are men and women of color, is I allow whatever kind of expression they want to have. If you want to walk up, extend a hand and shake mine, good. If you want to very loudly, like I learned to do in my community, like I see my man up the block. Ooh, ooh! What's good, my man? Good. Folks say, yeah, all right. I'm going to say, yeah. All right. Like that's going to be a part of our practice. You see me, you want to run up to me and give me a hug. If that for you is affirming, do so because that's going to allow for us to create rapport. I think a part of what I was given was the very general and necessary sense of how psychology exists as a science. And then the therapeutic piece, I was like, well, no, now I get to be an artist. I get to play around with that process some because every therapist isn't going to be for everyone.
Right.
But for myself, my approach, some of what I think people become attracted to in a number of my talks and a lot of my approach, even in my TED Talk, we're going to take this difficult concept, but we're going to have a conversation and I'm going to take a knee with you. Right? And I'm going to ask permission of those like, am I giving this to you in a way that feels in any way relatable to you? Can you attach this to your life? When I was teaching students, same thing. Are you able to take this information and see it in your life and in life spaces? If not, it's not going to work. Right? If you walk into my office and you feel that I am the superior and I'm supposed to be telling you about your life and that's how you're going to get better, psychology is not going to be effective. Well, if you can say, nah, man, I think I better understand myself, but in my words, and I understand my family and what my family did, the generational curses that exist, in my words, what our generation was trying to do for the first time was to break those curses. And our parents were pushing back.
But I think before that, we didn't even know that was possible.
We did.
Like that was just like, this is the way it is. This is your family, and you're going to keep on doing this. And
Right. What people would tell you what they were trying to do. So the idea was, black, in particular, black mothers and fathers were doing their best. And they were. They were. They were doing their best based on what they had been given. But then there's the necessity to step back and say, hey, listen, how you were raised may have been unfair.
Right.
If you have the notion that taking someone who is less powerful than you, in many instances helpless, I'm going to raise a better, more well-developed, healthier version of them by physically abusing that being. And if you were in your head saying, no, that's the way to do it, something fucked you up.
Well, it was that concept that, like, if I don't do this, the outside world is going to do worse.
Correct. And that was them trying to do their best.
I
So now we're at a point where it's like, okay, how do I have this conversation with my parents and then with my child? My mother visited us last in May. And both she and my mother-in-law both mention and talk about very openly how much agency my son has in our home. And my son is 15, and I will very often ask him his opinion. How does that feel to you? I understand you did that, man, but how does that feel to you? Right? And they see that amount of agency instead of us telling them that was right, that was wrong. We're going to tell them, nah, I think that was the wrong thing. But how does that feel to you? I'm holding you accountable for explaining that. For making this sound decision.
You tell me why that was okay.
Walk me through that.
Oh, man.
So back
that
then, we would get off the hook
up.
because all you would do is like, hey, do you want to sit and talk about it? Or do you want to get your behind cut?
Sure.
But I'll get my behind cut. Don't learn anything.
Don't learn anything.
But you're helping him understand.
Sure.
And
At
like
least we're trying to, right? And so very often what I find is there is still the component where, effectively I'm a New Yorker. You say the wrong thing to me.
Top off.
And, my son, at times. And so, I'm going to get, fuck you doing? Like, no, this is the problem, man. Everything all right? Like that kind of thing.
Like, let me check you real quick.
But even that it's a remnant of those generational curses that are in place that we're trying to break. In this community of youngsters behind us emotionally have chosen to break many of them.
Yeah.
Right? They haven't always done so well, but they're so powerful. They're so young. I think in many ways they're trying to show us how to do it. We want for them to not make a mess of things.
Like emotional intelligence? Like they have, you think they have more than
They have access to becoming more emotionally intelligent, but they are not best at wielding it. And I don't think that their goal is always to become more emotionally intelligent. Very often, because they have so much power, I think they're simply trying to hold on and learning how to wield it. Right. You know, emotional intelligence doesn't tend to be a large or significant or profound goal for them.
Right.
I mean, it should be, but
with time.
Say again?
With time.
With time, hopefully it will be. They were given so very much. When you have all this information at your hands, you can stop and say, you know, what is depression? Oh, man, I'm depressed.
It's a lot.
Yeah. No, not really, man. You might be sad. But
it's another word. It's a spectrum.
Yeah. You might be an emotional teenager.
You know,
that happens.
And we're doing that with a lot of our society, not just them. I mean, I think they engage in it more. But I mean, even in our generation, we're trying to reframe a lot of ways in which we were raised and ways in which we think. I, in recent years, have been trying to be more fair with my relationship with hip hop, which I love so much, because I at points was just like, well, I'm walking away.
Same.
You know, I'm not going to, but
y'all suck. I'm out. I'm listening to my old stuff.
But there was so much that was there. And I think there's even brilliance in the approach. You know, you look at someone like Big Crit, you know what I mean? Who there's a kind of genius in his method to not only painting this picture of where he is from and what he believes in, but how it's connected to so many other things.
Yeah.
Right. And if you sit down with, is he the most lyrical cat? Nah. Right. So there isn't that excellence that stays here, but there is excellence in his approach and what he does. If that makes any sense.
I think that's one of the strong aspects of hip hop in the South.
Absolutely.
It was that do it for yourself, build it from the ground up, make it work. And I know I hear a lot of folks that kind of watch documentaries, but I always watch them talk about folks from up north and say, yo, one thing we respect about them, they may not have the best lyrics or anything, but yo, they have everything from start to finish, straight vertical integration.
Absolutely.
And didn't even know that. Yeah.
And they had the record store right next door to the recording studio. They're like, we're going to do this.
Absolutely.
Vertical integration. And it's amazing to think about how that has evolved since then.
Powerful sense of community and created out of necessity.
Yes. I mean, since you love hip hop, who are your top? Or we have
top
five.
Top five.
My top five. Well, I mean, naturally, I have Jay-Z at number one. Number two, Nas was there for a long time for me, but Nas has fallen maybe out of my top five. Biggie, I'm going to hold at maybe number five. I'm going to make him my down barrier.
Gotcha.
What else do I have in my top five? KRS-One.
You have to put Chris.
And, you know, the Blastmaster is in my top five space. Top five.
Yeah, two more.
Yeah. Let me come back. And I will give you my other two. No, I mean, because there's so many folks that I consider, and then there's individual versus group, and then who I'm affected by. I'm a huge fan of Little Brother.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe that Little Brother may be, I mean, in my opinion, and some folks might object, maybe the most underappreciated hip hop group who have ever lived, right?
Like, it's ridiculous.
In my top five, I might have, in terms of group, and I would separate, you know, individual and group. If I was looking at group and building my five out, I would have Outkast in my top five. I would have Tribe Called Quest in my top five. I would have De La Soul. I would have Souls of Mischief. That would be in consideration. But Little Brother might be one for me.
I love this.
And in particular, I think they are so important because of all of the energy and the ideas and the excellent, like the combined. And then five in another way. Like if I'm looking at most important fives, you know, you have someone like MF Doom because he refused to in any way be beholden to this is how rap is supposed to be.
Yeah,
right. And you have someone like that, and then you have someone like the Grinch from out west that was like, no, I simply want to rap this way. And I understand it's going to be difficult for some folks to process, but it's what I'm going to do. Tupac would be probably number one in terms of importance. Yeah. Right. But in my head, I put him in number one in terms of importance, but I'm like, dude can't really rap well.
No. You're right. That's a hard one.
But was terribly, he was so important, you know, and in every way. And then I think of someone like Big Pun, who would probably be.
He can actually.
Would I have Big Pun in my? No, I'd have him in my top 10. Black Thought might be near my top 5.
You all start. You starting to forget. Good Lord, that is right.
Listen,
Because there are so many epic.
Nick Grant is someone who is important to me.
There's some good ones.
Yeah, since I would have trouble doing it. I would have to give you categories.
I can't do top 5s or anything.
I have trouble giving you a 5. Yeah.
Speaking on music, before I move over to the next question, I must ask. So recently, there was a little bit of tiff in the social world, the social interwebs, about there's a fellow by the name of DJ Academics, and he hosts he hosts his little shows and he talks to folks, and he's always on his Twitch and stuff. And he was getting into a little bit of a tiff with older generation foundational hip hop folks, calling them dusty due to their ability due to their inability to floss and show off money and etc. Because nowadays, one of the measures in hip hop, and like you were saying before, is not just the science of doing it, but the business aspect. Absolutely. And a lot of young folk don't realize that the ability for them to make the shares and monies that they make now come from that entire group of people, that era of making that foundation for them to have money and success. Where does your idea fall on? Like, is his understanding and his gripe with him, do you think it's based on actual like dislike, or is it an inability? And this is what I was thinking. The fact, I don't think he has much acceptance from the group, and I think he's kind of
he doesn't. I think that so it's a little layered. The very first issue I have, or would explore with what Academics said, is in and around the psychology of hip hop. And that has always been consumerism, always.
True.
Right. So there's always been the matter of how much money I have, how many women I have, the kind of property I have, look at my jewel. All of that has always been a part of
since day one.
Psychological power of hip hop. So that has remained consistent. You have to be able to show the money you've made, and you show that by showing me what you've accumulated. So he's talking about demonstrating and showing to others, we in fact want to be able to be voyeurs, and you show us your life in this way, right? He is consistent with what hip hop has been. We have to break that psychology, right? He is simply echoing what has been for decades now, a part of our psychology. As grown as Jay-Z is now, he had his moment with consumerism. As grown as Tupac became, he still very often talked about what his lifestyle allowed him to have.
Yes.
Right. That was always a part of it until folks broke out of it and grew up. Academics is a part of that continuous community, continuous psychology, continuous mindset. So I don't think we can blame him for that part. We collectively have to break that. But what is difficult for me to process through is why, considering how grown hip hop has become and as mature in parts as it's become, why we don't value our pioneers in the way other forms of music do.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that LL Cool J said in response to him that I thought was incredibly important was like, dude, nobody worried about what Miles Davis's bank account looked like.
That's true, yeah.
Right. The entire community
but
of
I bet
jazz
he had clean shoes.
Right. They could not, but they couldn't care less about what he actually made.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to know what he makes in show money. They didn't concern themselves with it. I think we have to value our pioneers for the sake of them being pioneers.
Okay.
And a part of that then requires that we be a more functional, cohesive community. We're still very divided as a community. The South is still the South.
Yep, it is.
New York is still New York. It's not even the East Coast. It's New York. It's still New York.
Philly can't have
The West Coast is right.
Philly can't have any of that.
You in fact have scenes in Baltimore and DC, but they get lost in the overall morass of things. And I think we would have to have a cohesive community which then says, we're going to honor our forefathers. But we still, instead of honoring women MCs, move them fully over into the female MC category.
Right.
Very true.
And then isolate them here. Like we don't have a full cohesive sense of community. We need that to be able to say, okay, you know what? LL Cool J gets to go out on tour in the same way that the Rolling Stones do.
That's what I don't get.
The Rolling Stones are knocking on 80 soon.
Yes.
And as soon as they announce 6 tour dates, those tour dates are going to sell out at the number
and
that they're going to sell out.
Bootlegging them tickets for $1,000 a piece.
Correct.
And
So hip hop is still, I think, very it's tied to a lot of its worst and least mature psychology, which we are still trying to grow out of. And some of that is
ego.
It's even a large part of it, that there's hubris even more so than ego. Like, I have to be what I write.
Yeah.
And so
live in the words.
with all of the money that I may accumulate, it would be best for me not to engage.
Good point.
Right. There's a drill rapper who is in prison at Rikers Island right now. A young, I think he might be 20, by the name of K-Flock, gang member. Video starting to get millions and millions of views. He signs a record deal. He's starting to make plenty of money, but he's still in a space in the Bronx, and he's walking down the street. Dude comes out of the barbershop. They're talking shit to each other. Apparently, he pulls out, he shoots him. Right.
Gotta keep it real.
And there are those in his space who are simply willing to justify what happened and what he had done.
Gotcha.
And that is not just him and his psychology. That is hip hop overall.
In
You are
general,
allowed to. So we have to be sure that we go about the business of addressing that psychology. And we have to address the psychology of consumerism, right? Can we simply honor our pioneers and how they built this? Can we establish our halls of fame? Can we establish what our most critical, impactful moments were and who those people were that were in that space, and then keep them lifted up in every possible way? Like, we talk about them the way that Rock talks about Motorhead.
Yeah.
Right. Regardless of what they've sold, what space did they occupy? And what did they give us?
Yeah.
And then what do we do with that? In academics, largely, man, we're giving him what he wants, man. Academics has always been a troll, bro.
That's my big thing. I know
Like,
that
if
from
we
day
keep
one.
on paying academics attention, he moved in from a space where he was like, those who were doing hip hop, those who were in hip hop never wanted me.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'm going to fuck with all of you every chance I get.
Yeah.
Right. And if you keep paying me attention, and who he represents wants to come with him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They're like, no, they don't accept us. So we're going to throw these rocks from the space that we're in.
And question, do you think, I always hear this, there's two things, and I'll stop belaboring the point, but I know in hip hop, they always say it's a young man's sport.
Sure.
And then also with hip hop, the youth, they are going to be the forefront in pushing in the new information, the new way of doing things.
Sure.
And that's a positive thing because you need it to continue to evolve and et cetera. But I know with other genres, they move forward, but they still revere the elders.
Correct. And it's the reverence that is missing because we tell ourselves it's a young man's sport, but we don't support our elders when they get busy on the court. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
like Jay-Z has shown us how elders get busy.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is to then say, man, I don't have to simply celebrate one aspect of hip hop. Am I looking at graffiti art and what are the graphs doing and what are those folks doing now? What were they doing then? Am I looking at the art of DJing and what is happening in that space and what those folks are doing? If we want to embrace overall hip hop, we simply have to, but we have to put our effort and our will and even money behind it.
And that's the full culture from the Break Boys and all of it. Like
everything that we do. Should I? Yeah, I will.
Let's do it.
Yeah, there was this show that Preach organized, Preach Jacobs, for those, man, listen, y'all listen to this, man. You know Preach
He's
Jacobs.
a friend of the show.
Right?
He's been on here. We've been on his class. Yeah.
Big friend of the show, man. Like, that's my beige light-skinned brother, and I'm dark beige, right? So he organizes this show a few years back, man, where he brings Sky Zoo down. Now, Sky Zoo is very dope.
Yeah.
Sky Zoo gets, like, Preach really broke his back to put this show together. And I can recall being there, and there were, I expected before I was walking in for it to be wall to wall, and there were a lot of folks. But I came in and was kind of like, nah, man, I love everything that this brother did to make this happen. And I'm a little disappointed that we didn't have the kind of energy that folks were saying they wanted. Because there's a kind of talk where folks want to, just in hip hop in general, I want to see more of it. I want to see it everywhere. I want to see it grow. But just like
show up.
Like in therapy, there's the work. I have to show up and support it. Here is someone who has completely broken what we do regularly right here in Columbia.
You're right.
Here's a high-end show with a high-end artist and the energies behind it. All you have to do is be there and engage. Like, completely bring the heavens down. Shake this building. And the folks who were there were doing their damnedest. But I'm like, bruh, we needed to have 1,000 times more energy in the city behind
what you're saying.
The city needed to be talking about that in the same way. And I'm not going to go away from it. I'm going to say it again, man. My expectation is any of you who are listening to this, especially if you're in the Carolinas, but outside of it. Like the Hilltop Glove is your podcast. Mm-hmm. These are members of your community. You should be sharing this shit everywhere.
Yeah.
You should be having thought-based conversations about the podcast and what the podcast brings. Elevate the podcast in that space. If the Carolinas have something to say, it has to be the community that says it. We have to create our greatness and push our greatness forward. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right. Right. Now, moving along, I know you're known for your extensive lectures about diversity, prejudice, privilege, race, and educational success of minorities.
Yes, sir.
And in 2015, you appeared in a TEDx talk discussing the cure for racism. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit more about your experience with TED and doing, I guess I hate to call it like the lecture circuit, but the lecture circuit, and how that has changed your life for the better?
It was a bit of a before and after experience. I'll tell you the truth, man. Like, I had been lecturing a lot before. Like, I had a pretty sound reputation, which is what, led to TED taking a look at me. Right. And you do a TED talk, and it's interesting because with TED, you're performing for the world to see. Yeah. Right. There are those who might be regionally or nationally aware of you. Perform a TED talk, and then it becomes another matter. Yeah. But then it becomes property of the world. Yeah. So you might have been having conversations with a lot of people who agree with you. Yeah. But you perform a TED talk, and now your opponents will show up. Right? And they'll show up in that, and they want to have
studies so
a
they can
conversation.
eviscerate you.
And I think the most interesting point for me was after, it took me probably 2 years to watch it myself. Really? And I was like, bruh, 2 years later, I disagree with a couple of my points.
That means you're growing, though. That's why I put that follow-up question in there.
Nah, man, one of the ways in which it grew me was, I think, and improved, I would say, my life as a thinker, intellectual, and someone who engages with his community and the overall community and around notions of advocacy and growth and change, really. I think it allowed me to have a broad conversation with a lot more people, even opponents who may have felt the way. I got a couple of pieces of hate mail. Really? And I can recall, and I can recall, there was the digital, which was interesting, but, when somebody decides to stop and write a letter and send it to your job, they're like,
I want him to see this.
Yeah. It was a moment where, I had an older brother just kind of sit me down, and he was like, that's how you know you've arrived.
Yeah.
At that point where you have that happen, right? For me, what was important was to be able to say, as a psychologist and using psychology, man, I can fight any fight that is out there. If I help people to understand and to look at something like racism and supremacy and be willing to say, this person hasn't necessarily chosen to be this way, right? A part of what impacts a number of conservatives is, if you look at psychology, you become a person who's a hurt person who hurts people. Chances are your environment, some sort of abuse, your family, they harmed you in some way. How is this person raised? And what is this person gaining from being who they are? What information do they feed themselves? And then can I in some way engage them so that they have a healthier means of gathering information? And why are they protecting themselves from gaining this information? What does supremacy allow them to do and feel? What does racism do for them? Do they know that they are being racist? Very often they do. But they don't always understand the mechanism that moved them to be motivated to be in that space and to become that kind of monster. And they don't know themselves to be but it allowed me to have that very broad conversation and to have it rapidly with a number of people and to, I think, get a message across that was necessary. There is a psychology to it. And there's a psychology to someone who says every day, I'm going to spend hours watching Fox News. Yes. Right. And I'm going to pull in as much of this information as I can. I feel unsafe. I feel my position is threatened. Someone's telling me that I don't feel as profound and powerful as I once did. I'm saying all lives matter, even though Black Lives Matter isn't saying that other lives don't. Like, they're gathering all of this information and why. Yeah. Right. So the piece for me was
like you're not like you want to feel like your assumptions were correct. It's like a reassuring that you're I don't know.
But it's an active,
but it allowed for a number of other conversations to be pulled into place. Because I had different people from different segments, say, well, come and engage with us in this conversation, man. Do Black men say enough about the kind of misogyny and misogynoir that exists? And can you engage there? And I had to examine myself and say, what is the psychology that pushes us into that spot? And then when you, in fact, have Black children who engage with their world in the way that they do? What psychologically drives it? What psychologically drives Black women and our families to engage in the ways that they do? I understand you've been painted in this way, but what's behind it? I think it opened up a number of conversations, and it allowed me in some way to say, hey, man, there's a bunch of people who are doing this work, who have been doing it before me. And I will tell you, that was something I wasn't fully prepared for, was the number of people who were intellectual parents and grandparents of mine who, to greater or lesser degrees, became somewhat envious.
Wow.
In that way, I would just like, no, man, this was something that I've been building for a while. Why did they choose you? And it's like, I'm nice with it. I don't know. Sometimes it's in the same way we have. Yeah. While you have someone like academics, you have someone like Method Man who questioned a couple of years ago. It's like, how are these young rappers making this money? I don't get it.
Yeah. But I get how your approach is different.
It's different.
Yeah, the way you broke it down, like I watched it, correct. I'm like,
it was different.
I can understand everything he's talking about in detail.
Sometimes it's a matter of being the right instrument for the right time. And
like you're a vessel.
Looking back to New York hip hop, someone like Nas was not necessarily going to reach all of the brothers in Mechanicsville, Georgia.
Good point.
Spitting the way that he was spitting. But it might have taken someone from Mechanicsville to be like, nah, man, I'm going to speak about your direct experience. And so sometimes movements, they become a matter of each community activating itself based on what that community needs.
Individually.
Moving forward, individually. Linking all of it up.
Yeah.
But no, it's put me in a good spot. I think it's a part of why I push so much toward like Carolina, like, yo, let's go get after it. You know what I'm saying?
I see that. Yeah.
I don't get to work as much here as I would like, only because USC will give me a call and they're like, we're doing this program, man. We have $1,500 to do it. Can you do it? Nigga, my number is 10. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And you know that. You see me working. Right? So these folks from over here I'm going over there. And I want to be here. Like, don't call me with that. And don't call anybody who is in this space. Listen, and I'm going to say it again.
They do that here.
Whoever it is in this state, whoever is working in this state, whether it be the arts, whether it be professionals, man, like South Carolina, let's get after it. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's really push the notion of community and greatness for one another and push energy into each other, man. Let's do that. Let's be less humble, man. I feel like we're really waiting for somebody to be like, "We're all right, man." Like, we are great as is on our own, in our own voice, man. But we got to prove that. We got to push that for ourselves, man. I'm sick of waiting. I truly am. Just sick of it.
No, that's a good point because, like you said, and it goes with Fat Joe saying this is for real. Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Right. No.
And you have to show and ask.
And I think in certain instances, it's not only the number, but the way in which, I don't know what you guys' streaming numbers are in terms of who listens. But I know that. I want for everybody who is in any way connected to anyone who listens to this program to hear the program. Yeah, right? That's what I want to get at, because I'm thinking about where a podcast like this can push your energy.
Gotcha.
As me and bro were talking about earlier when I came in, like what you can create, the kind of community you can create, the kind of projects you can create if everyone in the state gets on board.
Joined in.
In some way. So we aren't isolated in our efforts. We can really pool those efforts. And you can be a process leader in this way, right? But it starts with a flagship.
Yeah.
And then everyone is built around that into a fleet. And if the flagship is the Hilltop, then good work. But let's make it that, because you're here already. So let's push effort into it.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? When it comes to shit starters, psychologists, that's me. Put your effort into me. Like, I'm your flagship already. Whoever it may be, any and everybody that's building, anyone that's been on this program, push effort into them, push will into them.
Man, that's what I like to hear, man. And I know we're about to get ready to wrap up, but I must ask this real quick question. What do you enjoy most about lectures? Just the idea. Yeah. What do you, because you have to get something out of it.
Yeah. I think what I probably enjoy most is kind of seeing people engage with information that may be new to them and them not necessarily learning, but processing.
And watching them pathways.
So you're a process person.
Oh, absolutely.
He's an all process person.
I mean, process is necessary because it allows you to revisit. You're never really fixed.
Yeah.
But if you have process in place, you can always improve it.
Yep.
You can always evolve it.
Go back and edit.
So that's incredibly important to me. Yeah. So I think seeing people engage and very often become inspired in their own work in a lecture is sound, man. I think what lectures allow for me to do separate from the therapeutic work that I do. I mean, I have a very specific population I work with therapeutic. You know what I mean? I work with combat veterans.
Oh, okay.
So there's the kind of work that I do.
Man, we need to talk.
No, seriously.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's that piece. But when I get out into different types of communities and community spaces, and we have lectures that we are engaging in, what we're sharing in very often is them giving me energy and me trying to give that back.
Gotcha.
In some way. So it's not necessarily teaching, but sharing in that way. And I love the energy that comes from it. For me, like, I'm not a rapper, I'm not a singer, I'm never going to, well, I shouldn't say, maybe not, probably won't be anywhere in a concert. But for me, a lecture is a kind of concert. It's a process and thought concert where if I can give people, it's a part of why I love a brother like Dr. Christopher Emdin. If you get a chance, look at everything Christopher Emdin does. He's in education, but the brother really talks about life. Like, as soon as he breathes on a mic and starts getting busy talking to people about how they see themselves as thinkers, right? How they see themselves engaging information that they're learning. I'm like, God damn, man. So one of the things that I engage with in process is these notions that exist outside of us that I want for people to have in their lives, right? So there's this belief that is out there mythologically that genius visits all of us at some point in our life. Right. And what you do with it at the time where it visits you is going to determine whether or not you become fully realized in that moment. But then you always have these other moments to be fully realized. But genius is going to visit you and you're going to feel inspired. And maybe you don't have the energy to do something with it, but it's going to come to you. And if you do something with it, it might come to you more than once, but it's never going to stay with you forever. Right. But the idea is that it's going to be there with you for some period of time. In other words, we all have the potential to be great in that way. So what's going to allow us to build toward that great and well space? And sometimes it's a matter of just, man, how do I think about myself?
Right.
How do you feel about
what
yourself?
I know about myself? For me, you know what I'm saying? You know, I'm a poor Black kid from the Bronx, ultimately. And in the spaces where I was trying to get to, my notion, my understanding was, man, like, fuck it, just fight hard because it's what you do. So being in graduate school, man, and I say this to anyone who's moving through that process where you feel like the process is against you, whatever the process is, right? So I came in and I was a graduate of a state university and most of the other students in the program were from Ivy, just to tell you the truth. We have to introduce ourselves on the very first day. And they're running down these schools, man, you know, in particular, Princeton, Penn, Cornell, shout out to Courtney Bay. But they're running down all these schools that they're from. And I'm like, damn, man, you know, my name's Napoleon Wells. I'm last to introduce. What am I supposed to say? Right. I mean, because I'm about to tell them what schools, right?
I mean, at least you're last. I'm first.
But,
Your last name.
But the idea that I brought with me and I had in place was like, oh, man, I just plain want it more than they do. This is a yard.
Yeah.
And we're all dogs of a kind, man. There's only this one piece of meat. And they've been better groomed. They're purebred, but I simply have been hungrier for longer. So another scar does what? You know what I mean? So I'm willing to, are you willing to bite me and ruin your teeth to get that meat? Because I'm willing to.
Yeah.
Right. It's that kind of
Some
thinking.
pretty teeth.
It reminds me of the movie. It reminds me of the movie Gattaca.
Right.
That's what, you're just more willing.
Is there the for me, there was the kind of understanding that I'm operating without a net. It's many of us all.
Yeah, without
a net. So if I lose,
who cares?
Who cares, right? I'll do something else.
Yep.
Where for many of them, that was their identity. They've always succeeded and they've always won. But I was just in my head like, dude, I'm just so much better than you because of how much I'm willing to do to get after it.
Your ability to risk.
Correct. And to then believe, but to believe in myself as I actually am, not the finished product, but who am I fully in this moment?
In that moment,
Right in this moment. Who am I in this moment? What's the growth in this moment? And how do I evolve past it? That's for another day, right?
Wow. Yeah. We're going to have to do this again.
Yes.
We definitely will.
We'll get together, man. Listen, I fully believe in everything that you folks are doing. I appreciate you having me here with you.
Do you have any upcoming projects we can look out for?
I do. I'm working on finishing up my own project. Most of what you will read, and you will go read what I've written, many of the short stories, most of those are short stories that have been published in other books. Do I have a name for it? Now, I'm working on 2 different names right now. One of them is Ce Soir. That is it. The other one is going to be an English version, but I really like the Ce Soir. I may finish with that one because Tonight really describes the tone of the book. But it's Black speculative fiction. I hope to have it finished near my birthday, which will be in January. I have, where I am right now, better than half of it written. Wow. The problem is I keep expanding it as I do with a number of my stories, but you can find what I do just about everywhere. Look up Napoleon Wells. A Blade in a God's Hand is one of my stories, The Siege at Illinmorrow, and A Bullet from a God's Gun. You can find those in a couple of anthologies. Cyberfunk anthology, the Space Funk anthology is coming up soon, and I'm planning to contribute to that one as well. So you'll see one short story there before the big book drops. With regard to my work, if you aren't a veteran, don't call me. Don't call me or look for me. But I work with the Department of Veterans Affairs at the Columbia Vet Center. If you are a veteran and you listen to this, and this is not a joke, this is, well, we've passed Suicide Prevention Month now, but what I want to let you know is whatever you're struggling with, whatever difficulty you're having, we're doing the work. And I can understand if you're reluctant to come in, if you've had difficult experiences with the VA in the past. We are a slightly different entity. We focus entirely on counseling service. All of us who are in that space do the counseling work. If you want to talk to us, need to talk to us, even if you come in and talk to us just once, do so. If you don't mind, I'm going to drop the number for our veteran community, 803-765-9944. It's the Columbia Vet Center. We're right downtown on Richland Street. If you put us in your little Google machine, it'll bring you over to us. You can walk in and see us. You can call us. You can ask for me by name. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30, we're around. Okay.
And what about your social media?
Do I know my social media information? Napoleon the Blurred, psychologist on IG. Look me up by name of Napoleon Wells. Everywhere else, you will find me. I tend to generally post pretty often. I post about the projects that I'm working on. I give a shout out to all of the publishers that I work with. I hear from a number of publishers. If you're listening at all, don't reach out to me. Don't reach out to me. There's a process for it. Don't reach out to me, man. Y'all ain't talking the right things. Right? Don't reach out to me, man. We're working right now to get to where
we have to have you on the show again.
We'll talk again, certainly. And I think most importantly, everything I said, and I'm going to say it again, I want to see ambassadors, and I want to see power, and I want to see self-contained greatness in our states of North and South Carolina. You're listening to the Hilltop Glove podcast. It needs to be everywhere you are. So I'm asking that you continue to make it a priority to be sure that everyone who is around you is doing the same. Play this thing everywhere, man. We are the creators of our greatness space. So do so, man. Go out and get Preacher Jacobs, get these folks, the Hilltop Glove podcast. Go get me, Dr. Napoleon Wells. I know Dr. Shari Dade has been on this, so go get Everyday Psychology. Dejanti Management with her folks. Go and get them. Literally anybody who has been on
any episode
of this podcast, man, go get those and listen closely. All the folks who have been on the podcast, man, we need to come together festival style and let's create some good shit.
We got it coming.
Let's get together. Let's make this thing happen, man.
You got a brunch invite now.
Yo, Carolina first, man. Carolina first. Bottom line, Carolina first. I'm going to say that. And I want that to become a thing. So Carolina first. We're going to have that convo.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that wraps it up pretty well for today. I want to thank everybody for listening to the Hilltop Glove podcast. From DJ and What to Maya Allen, Mike.
Peace.
That's it for today's episode of the Hilltop Glove podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hilltop Glove.